very large geography that spans Bosnia of today, that has collections of Persian manuscripts. So I want people to be quite aware that everything we cherish as part of our heritage was selectively created.
A group of people get to a point that object to someone who speaks a different language but is still part of the same community. Hello and welcome to Stand-Up Historian. Today my guest is Dr. Aria Fani. Welcome.
Thank you. Lovely to be here.
Welcome to Stand-Up Historian. Dr. Fani is Associate Professor of Persian and Iranian Studies at the University of Washington, and he is the author of award-winning book, Reading Across Borders, Afghans, Iranians, and Literary Nationalism. Welcome to Stand-Up Historian, Doctor.
Thank you for bringing me.
Thank you. It's a great honor to have you here.
Honor's all mine.
I have prepared a little bit of biography, but when you're here, why should I read from here when you can tell us a quick synopsis of your
the past 40 years? I recently turned 40, and so that definitely I've been prepared to maybe talk about my biography given all the reflection
Yes.
I've been doing. I was born and raised in Iran, like you. Lived in Shiraz all my life up until 18, and then I moved to California in pursuit of higher education. Finished my bachelor's at San Diego State, majoring in English, which, as you know, all Iranians, they pursue the humanities, like 99% of them. Nobody becomes a physician or engineer. It's all, these are all unfounded rumors.
No pun intended.
No. Then I moved to Mexico to teach English.
Mexico.
And absolutely fell in love with Mexico, and learned Spanish, and I've maintained that connection over the past 13 years.
Great.
With not just with Mexican culture, but Latin American cultures. And I love traveling. I spent my honeymoon in Colombia and Ecuador.
Oh, nice. Great place.
And then started grad school a year after in Berkeley. And then I came to the University of Washington in 2019 BC, before COVID. And here I am in 2026.
And I love the sense of humor. That's very, very Iranian or Persian?
I prefer both. Neither.
You are specifically Persian. You are from the province of Fars.
I am, yes.
So you are more Persian than I am, perhaps.
Excuse me, nobody is more Persian than I am. I'm more Persian than Cyrus, some people say.
Well, this is a great honor to have Dr. Aria Fani here. I had a little bit of time to go over his book. I recommend it to everybody to look at it. It's not just a book about two nations having a common language, right? Would you like to tell us a little bit about the book? And also, there is a very personal story about writing this book. Would you like to share that with us?
Yeah, I think every book is a personal story.
Yes.
Sometimes it goes unsaid, and that's honestly, in academia, is very common. People feel that the reader doesn't stand to benefit from understanding why the author came to write this book. I wanted to foreground that because I wrote this book, whether consciously or subconsciously, to fill all the gaps in my own knowledge, and I continue to. And coming to California really put me in conversation with a host of other Persian speakers that I knew so little about, because I grew up in a country where Persian as a language, as a literary tradition, was framed as an exclusive patrimony of Iran.
Yes.
And so coming to California, meeting Afghans in particular, but not just Afghans, so many others that are directly or indirectly inspired, engaged with Persian literature. I mean, we're talking about, not to sound imperialist, in any way, but a very large geography that
Yes.
spans Bosnia of today, that has collections of Persian manuscripts that they fought to save when Serbia was bombing them, all the way to the western frontiers of China, where you see
Yes.
those traces in Uyghur-speaking societies. And exactly what made Persian such a robust vehicle for cross-cultural communication and literary production was the fact that it didn't belong to one specific group. It wasn't a Jewish language or a Muslim language or Zoroastrian language. It was not just a language of empire. It was, an instrument for cultural production. And that does not say that it was all democratic and egalitarian and people were dancing on the street. There's no gender binary. There's no, ownership involved. Of course, there's, the discourse of adab, which I talk about a lot. It was extremely hierarchical, but that is to say that those hierarchies were not tied necessarily to ethnicity, religion, or race in ways that were very straightforward or predetermined.
So you argue that Iran was not necessarily a certain geographical area, people living in that, and they call it Iran, and it has been from the beginning. It's more like groups of people, they spoke a common language to communicate. They belong to different cultures and different backgrounds, if you will, and they used this language to communicate. And throughout the time and communications, they created what we call it literature or adabiyat. Is that
That's a great question. So let's jump into
Please.
it. Historians always love to start with time period, the body of work that's examined in the book, and the main question that animates it. The book really starts in the very late 19th century.
Mhm.
So I feel comfortable setting the scene,
Sure.
at least for that period, because before it is, so many contingencies. But in the late 19th century, you have the European model of the nation state that is defined as a unitary people, usually defined by race, and race understood as shared characteristics that are physiological, cognitive, behavioral in a group of people. We've moved away from that, obviously, paradigm. And every nation has a distinct civilization, and that distinct civilization can be studied through archaeology, so the study of objects in history, and philology, the study of language in the context of history. And often that heritage was understood to be singular. So, Arabs could, only talk about one language, Iranians, their own one language, their national language, the Turks, Indians. And so this created a massive anxiety to then manufacture monolingual culture out of deeply multilingual regions. So this is one of the key anxieties at the heart of Adabiyat as an idea, because Adabiyat before the 19th century just referred to these systematized forms of knowledge that were associated with adab, and adab defined as the proper form.
Yes.
In very concrete terms, when you encounter a grieving father, what do you say? How do you bring consolation? How do you sit with elderly? How do you, all sorts of scenarios, moral scenarios that would fit different time periods and different people. And how is it that this plural collection of sciences slowly becomes a singular designation for literature as a body of work that embodies the national character and the civilizational achievements of the people? This idea was an invention of the 20th century. The book tells the story of two generations of Iranian and Afghan intellectuals that set out to bring Adabiyat into alignment with the European idea of literature, literature, in the course of 50 years.
So you argue that nation was a creation,
100%.
and then throughout 19th and 20th century, literature started to form that nation and becomes part of the characteristic and personality of that nation,
100%.
and assign that to a nation.
Exactly, exactly. And that is not to say that, you know, when you say invention, that you're delegitimizing the identity of a people or a place. Invention actually highlights that agency, the agency of the people. That means they chose to define themselves as a collective according to these elements, one of which is monolingualism.
Yeah.
And if we imagine our past that way, and we organize our society ideologically according to that vision, then we can reorganize our society. Now we have a society that is, you know, our primary affiliation is with the nation state. Now we can imagine a future where that affiliation is taken away according to the unit of the nation state, and instead is with our environment, which we've been at war with. And so that's the spirit in which I use invention.
This is a groundbreaking idea, because as you're speaking, I'm thinking this is going to change a lot of stuff in the minds of people, because you are presenting the idea that this is a construct, this was created, this was not existed from 2,000, 3,000 years ago. If I go back 2,500 years ago to the time of, for instance, in Iran, Cyrus the Great. Sorry, I constantly go back in time.
You want to bring out my Trump impersonation again.
And if I go back to that time, the concept of Iran, the idea of Iran as a nation is going to be different. And perhaps when they talk about my people, when those kings of those times, this is different. Now we get to 19th, 20th, 21st century, and these ideas are ingrained in each and every one of us, that this is a nation, this has always been a nation, and we had a language, and language was Persian or Farsi, and then we have different eras for the language, we define that specifically, and then we bring the literature into this, fit it, and say, okay, here's the whole package. This is your national personality for any Iranian, and same thing happened for the Afghans. Is that what you're suggesting?
You set up the next idea that I'd like to get into so well. You know, I'd like to say two things about the idea of how nations are defined, or how nations define themselves. One, they're just all rooted in continuity.
Yes.
That it's very important that we show that for the past 2,500 years we've spoken the same language, you know, we're essentially the same race. The idea of Iran may have undergone changes, but it's fundamentally the same geography, cultural, political, linguistic. And I have a fundamental problem with that. And even if somebody disagrees and insists on continuity, I want them to understand that they are actively reading history according to certain paradigms then that lead you to make that assumption. So let me just put my cards on the table.
Sure.
I do not believe in the anthropological or cognitive idea that all generations are bound together through language, religion, or ethnicity. I don't believe that the Iranians of the early Qajar period are the same people as the Iranians of the later Qajar period. And to me, it's a false task to even go back to, say, the Shahnameh and ask, well, is this the same Iran as the Iran of today? Fundamentally, they're all different, right? And if we understand these ruptures, these transformations, these changes, we understand that Iran has come to matter in a very different way, to be structured in a very different way, now that you have an army and the idea of citizenship and borders and passports and national schools that create uniformity, and you have institutions that define one's heritage. And you could tell me that that doesn't change, fundamentally change the idea of what Iran is. And so I think all nation states can go back, all nations can go back in time and find an identity and build some sort of narrative of continuity according to it. You and I were talking before the recording, and you said the United States is, widely believed to be a very young country.
Mhm.
But when it wants to, it can very much extend that genealogy or its national lineage as far back as the Greeks or as the Romans, right? And it's wrapped up with whiteness. It's wrapped up with Christianity. They all of these kind of categories collapse onto one another, and this is what happened in Iran, where Persian as a language, among many other languages, Iran has always been multilingual.
Yes.
It was in the times of
Yes.
Achaemenids. It was at the advent of Islam, and it is today. And to manufacture an identity rooted in racial singularity, in cultural singularity, requires so much violence, not just physical violence, which of course Reza Shah unleashed on Iran's population, particularly the nomadic population, but also so much cultural violence. We know that the book features a document, that the Pahlavi dynasty sent to the eastern Azerbaijan province,
Yes.
that you may not produce anything in Turkish, you may not speak Turkish. And so I want people to be quite aware that everything we cherish as part of our heritage was selectively created. And that means if we were exclusionary in those selections, if we excluded all these people, all these identities, or we saw them as complications to an Iranian
Yeah.
identity, then we can do things differently going forward, because this was not set in stone.
So, can you tell this about any group of people, any country or nation?
100%. I mean, look at Spain.
Yeah.
The idea of Western civilization itself is an invention of the 20th century. The idea that what binds all of these Western countries, so Europe, the United States, Australia, New Zealand, what binds them together is their drive towards democracy, rational inquiry, and freedom of religion. These are the values that bind the idea of Western
values.
civilization. When in reality, actually, what binds them together is colonialism. Settler colonialism in the case of the United States, Australia, New Zealand, and colonialism abroad in the case of Europe. But Spain was anti-democratic when Japan had already embraced democracy. And what was happening under Franco's
Yes, exactly.
Spain was a lot of the anxieties that this book talks about. That to be Spanish means to speak Castilian, to be white, and to be Catholic. And I remember meeting a colleague who was Basque, and she would remember speaking Basque to her mother on the street, and somebody would come and slap them in the face, and they would say "Habla Cristiano," speak Christian, which is again the collapsing of the categories. Like to be Christian means to speak Castilian, and to be Castilian means being Catholic. And this is exactly why we also mix Iran and Persian. We use them interchangeably when they shouldn't be used interchangeably. And so yeah, you can really take that model and understand how other countries have formed.
So there must be some kind of force behind the creation of these nations, right? When someone says "Habla Cristian," so what was the force behind this? How did a group of people, I'm just trying to avoid saying nation, a group of people get to a point that object to someone who speaks a different language but is still part of the same community? What is it? Is it the same force that was applied to Afghanistan and Iran with their literature and nationality to create that? Is it the same force that created the Western countries or Western values, or is this the same thing that or where this force comes from. Is it historical force? Is it cultural force? What is that?
It's definitely an amalgamation of forces. You know, the collapse of empires. Empires operated very differently.
Yeah.
So, you know, take the example of the Mughals in India. You have Muslim rulers, you know, that had come into the Indian subcontinent from Central Asia, Babur
Yeah.
from the Fergana Valley, and they didn't really care about creating uniformity in India. I mean, to create uniformity in India, that's a wild project. It's a wild project. And so what they cared about is collecting taxes and providing security for their subjects. They did not pursue a policy of mass conversion. They did not impose a single language on their population. And when empires collapse and these nation states start taking form, and one of the forces that shaped the nation state was colonialism, right? In the case of Iran and Afghanistan, your viewers might say, but wait a second, Iran and Afghanistan were not formally colonized the way Egypt was, the way India was, all these places. But not having been formally colonized does not mean that colonial discourses did not shape our identity. And you could see that, especially in the case of Iran, these ideas were in the air, and Reza Shah to have a dynasty with the political appetite to ideologically shape society, to create uniformity. I'm going to assign you a last name. From today on, you're going to speak Persian. Shi'ism is the main cultural identity, a religious identity of the state. You're going to have your tie and suit.
Yes.
This is the case with all these professors of Persian literature.
Yes,
Like,
yes.
Firuz
Attire
Alfar.
was, yes,
They
completely.
would come as seminarians with a turban, and then
Yeah.
all of a sudden they would jettison all of that. So this is the adab of becoming a professor. You're
Yes.
different from a seminarian. And so in Afghanistan, I think what you see as different than what's happening in Iran is Shah Amanullah, who ruled from 1919 to 1929, did not want to or could not exercise the same amount of violence that Reza Shah did on Iranian society in creating, consolidating it. And as a result, this idea of a very cohesive Afghan identity did not take form there. And I'm not saying it as a negative thing at all.
Oh, I understand.
It's just as
Yes.
a matter of fact. And also different from Iran was that they pursued a bilingual policy, Persian and Pashto, as opposed to the monolingual policy that the Pahlavis adopted. In Afghanistan, they did still exclude languages like Uzbek. The Uzbeks in the court of Zahir Shah were very
Yes.
dismayed that they were excluded. They really wanted to advocate for formal recognition. But a comparative study is useful in that it shows how none of this project is straightforward or formulaic or predestined, that they take very different shapes because they go through different scenarios.
It could have gone a different way.
Very differently. No, there is nothing inevitable about Iran being what it is today. You and I could be having this conversation in Azeri. If the Pahlavis had said, you know what, that's the second most widely spoken language, we're going to be teaching it in school. Things could have been extremely different.
So in order to, now the concept of country comes to mind. For Reza Shah specifically, he consolidated all these differences that was inside the culture, even religious beliefs, and also borders. So when we're talking about a country, I believe three main things to define a country is border, language, and culture, correct? So this was saving whatever was left of Iran from the previous dynasty and creating something solid, a monolith, to move forward in a new world that was emerging at the time. Did that help anybody? Did that help people that they were living under that system, or it caused upheavals in the future?
That's a great question. I think any system is a system of sticks and stick and carrot. You can't just shape a society through punitive forces. You also have to offer them something.
Yeah.
The same way empire said, you pay me taxes and I'll let you be, and I'll provide security for
Yeah.
you. The British are not just going to roll in and next thing you know, I'm collecting taxes on behalf of Queen Victoria, which is how the Mughal Empire ultimately,
Yes,
it ended.
yeah.
And so the Iranian nation state definitely offered tons of opportunities in return. And a good example is the cadre of intellectuals that I study in the
Yes.
book. Badiüzzaman Firuzanfar, Malik
Sure.
Shuara Bahar, Qari Abdullah in Afghanistan, and many others. They were recruited into these emerging national institutions like the University of Tehran, University of Kabul, Farhangistan, the Academy of Persian Language. And so as an incentive to then retrain yourself. No, you're no longer teaching the Quran at the madrasa, you're now teaching a subject called the literature. And the incentive is mobility within the system, visibility. And that required the idea of civilization as one of the other forces that was driving it. Because civilization as a concept before the 1930s was basically barbarity versus civility, right? And everybody had their own, like
Sure.
the Greeks called the Berbers barbarian because the language.
They even
seemed
called
important.
Persians
Ajams,
barbarians.
100%.
Yes.
Ajam is someone whose Arabic who stutters in
Yeah.
Arabic, right? And after the 1930s, this Wilsonian, going back to the American president, this Wilsonian idea that a civilization is a complex, is one's history, and again going back to objects, monuments, but also language is the index to a people's spirit and behaviors. And it really became this constellation, the
Yes.
civilization, and then a hierarchy, right? And of course, at top of the hierarchy were the Europeans, because imperialism and capitalism and colonialism are inherently narcissistic. But all these other countries, to prove that they too are civilized and evolved and worthy of being called a nation, they had to prove their credentials, one of which was to have a literature.
That's fascinating because it doesn't stop at the literature.
No.
When you start looking outward at a colonial power, like at the time England, and you start changing your group of people to wear the same ways, to act the same way, without having the same values, the same backgrounds, and the same history, you create a new creature. You create a group of
100%.
people that they will have problems and issues in the future because there is conflict simmering under the surface. And did we see it in terms of at the revolution of 1979? Could that be part of issues that this type of creation of?
That's a fabulous point of entry. But let me quickly go back to you mentioned England, you mentioned Great Britain. The creation of English as a literary discipline, the idea of the English canon, Shakespeare, Chaucer, it actually was not created in London or Oxford or Cambridge. It was created in Kolkata and Mumbai and Delhi, because they wanted to create a class of Indian imperial subjects that were versed in polite learning, that were versed in basically British mores and ideals, and so they wanted to instill their cultural values and mold them into these bureaucrats that ultimately were not seen as the same stature as the British, because they're Indian. They were never going to be seen the same. And the same way French approached Moroccans and Algerians, right? You could be Francophone, but you could never be French.
That's right.
Now, what exactly is the boundary? Who knows? With the Iranian Revolution, the comment I have is, oftentimes, again, continuity and rupture, we look at the creation of the Islamic Republic as a moment of breaking from the Pahlavi dynasty,
Yes.
from an Iranian identity. People would say, we started bringing back Arabic words into the language, we have hostility towards the Shah.
Brought back hijab for women.
100%. That's like
yes.
one of the most visible and concrete ways. But in fact, there's a lot of continuity between the Pahlavi dynasty and the Islamic Republic. One of them is commitment to monolingualism. The Islamic Republic, for all of its messaging on Islamic egalitarianism and love for the masses, for the downtrodden, mustazafin, they have jailed Kurdish educators. They have been punitive towards people who Azeri educators. The idea that, for instance, the mausoleum of Ferdowsi or Hafiz, or these are sites of national pilgrimage. There's something fundamentally Iranian about them that across time and space. The Islamic Republic did not disturb any of those, basically, those constructs. You know, for instance, when you go to Tus at the mausoleum of Ferdowsi, they may have crossed over, the patron, or this was created by the Pahlavis, the Anjuman Asar Melli. But that's all this is. There's still very much, that heritage is very much intact, and you could see Ayatollah Khamenei, the observations he's made about, the assertions he's made about Hafiz actually are really, really instructive here. He says Hafiz is essentially Iranian. Our Islam is different from the Islam of Arabs. Our Sufism has softened the kind of legalistic or rough edges of Islam. And so here is somebody who sees himself as not just the supreme leader of Iran, but as a Shia leader to Muslims in the region.
Yes.
And he's basically giving this alienating rhetoric about how Iranians are exceptional and they're different. And so this idea of Persian exceptionalism or Persian cultural singularity runs through the Pahlavis into the Islamic Republic.
And they introduce the element of religion when he comes out and he says, our Islam is different than
I don't think they introduced it. I think they emphasized
it.
Because let's not forget, the Shah was a religious man.
He was. We remember the coronation.
He was a religious man.
Yes.
He considered himself a believing Muslim, and there were even religious ceremonies at his court.
And he went to Hajj.
Right? And you could say he wanted to appease the population. He wanted to perform, but those are the facts. And I think after the revolution, Islam definitely became an animating ideology. But what I want your viewers to also remember is that the 1980s are a time when political Islam is globally being instrumentalized to fight against communism.
That's a great point.
And so outside of Iran, literally you have armed insurgency in the form of the Mujahideen and all the factions that are going and killing Soviet soldiers. But we frame that as these are good Muslims, freedom fighters. And then within Iran, because they were hostile to US imperialism, we frame them as, these are extremists, these are fundamentalists. And so that is a very one-sided, transactional view that the US always has towards Islam. It's, again, the problem that the US has with Iran, with the Islamic Republic, is not its Islamic nature, is the Republican nature.
Yes, that's a great point, because as we were discussing, when you deal with a republic, and you are also a republic, this country is a republic, and then you're not dealing with another monarch on the other side to demonize that. This is also, we are Islamic Republic, says we're a democracy, we have elections, we elect our president, and we have that. This is fascinating, and it begs for a lot of more questions, which I think by reading this book, I was able to figure out some of the connections and what you were trying to do. And to be honest with you, it sounds like a moment of awakening to something bigger that you belong to, and it was limited. And maybe the reason was to unify a country which has different tribes, different people, different languages, and all of that. A multicultural country, which Iran is literally by any means religion, languages, and everything. You have a huge diversity for a very long time. I'm just going back very long time. I'm going to stay in this century. So maybe just to, and in their mind, like in the mind of Reza Shah, in order to create a safe country, he decided to, okay, I have to create one language. All the while, he could acknowledge this multi-language fact that people have in this country, allow that, and build something else. Do we see any example of that? That's my last question. Do we see any example anywhere in this world that they embraced that and they said, you know what, that's what we are? Is the United States that example?
No, definitely not. The United States is a very stubbornly monolingual country where different languages are present in every place. You hear them walking on the street, but the cultural form is very monolingual. Language learning is not incentivized, and more importantly, people associate Americanness with English, even though, unlike the French that have Académie Française, that polices language usage, that French, to be French is very closely tied with being francophone or French speaking, because francophone also included people that did not want to be under the umbrella. Or like even the Spanish have Real Academia Española, but we don't have an equivalent of it in the Anglophone world. In spite of that, this is unfortunately the cultural form that it has taken. Who would be a good model for us? I mean, that is extremely hard, but India might be a very flawed example of multilingualism on a scale that you don't see elsewhere. English replaced Persian in the 19th century as the language of bureaucracy and cultural importance. And what's interesting is that the first books of grammar on English, so that Indian bureaucrats could learn the language, were written in Persian.
In Persian to learn English.
You basically, you go into the East India Company in Bengal, and you can't teach them English in English. They don't know the language,
of course.
So you have to give them, in Persian. And there were British officers that composed qasidas for Queen Victoria in Persian. And once it replaced it, then they basically took, again, a very national approach to language, and so Hindi became a very racialized language associated closely with Hindus, and Urdu became associated with Muslims, even though those bifurcations are very arbitrary and very problematic to this day. But in every province you do have other languages, Punjabi, Marathi, Tamil, all these languages, in a way that you don't have, you don't see it, for instance, in Iran, that you don't have formal recognition for Azeri or Kurdish or Luri, or in Mexico, not even for Nahuatl, which is the language of the Aztecs. The only Latin American country that I think recognizes a language other than the European one is Paraguay, with Guarani, besides Spanish. There might be others that I'm not aware of, perhaps Peru. But this is a future that we have to fight for inclusion and against erasure, against uniformity. And I think given the prominence of AI right now in our world, that fight is so much more important. Because the future of AI is one of unthinking, a generation of unthinking, subservient, obedient, capitalist zombies. And I don't want that for my students, and I don't want that for my daughter. I don't want it for my enemies.
That's a great point you made about AI, and I think this is also for us to end this conversation. This could go for hours. I really enjoyed talking with you and the awakening. I'm going to take this from this session, this program. This is the greatest awakening.
Some people say this is better than the Bible, by the way.
They're like the art of the deal is the art of the deal, and then you have the reading across borders.
This is the best impersonation I've ever heard. This is great. Doctor, thank you very
for the
much. It
lovely
was a pleasure.
conversation. Yeah, pleasure
And
so
thank
much.
you very much for joining us. The book is Reading Across the Borders, Afghans, Iranians, and Literary Nationalism by Dr. Aria Fani. It is not just Afghans and Persians. It's a story of humanity and how we have been divided. Thank you very much, and until the next time, goodbye.